Hey guys, this is Illusion Podfics, and today we're going to be reading Birds of a Feather by House_Library. This is Chapter 13. Where was Peter? Damien blinked through what he could only think were tears out of his eyes. He couldn't see Peter. He was gone. The pain he had just gone through was something he would never want to experience again. He had been through training himself to combat the body's reaction to pain, but whatever just happened, was more than just pain. Damien had never really ever considered the fact that otherworldly influences could be in play with what had been going on, due to Peter being such a big distraction for him. Although he was adamant he was going to continue ignoring him till Peter finally got his shit together, it didn't mean that Peter hadn't been living rent-free in his head since he originally arrived in Gotham. He was internally scolding himself for not being more observant and aware of what was actually at stake. Of course, the thought had crossed his mind, but since the whole situation with Peter created a whole other slew of situations, it was something that slipped by. Damien groaned as he turned to his side, his cheek grazing the cold tile of the bathroom floor. When the red smoke appeared, he didn't really know what to think before Peter came toppling into him. It was almost in an instant that his body felt like he was shriveling up like a raisin. He had felt several horrible sensations. It was normal since he was involved in the criminal circles of Gotham. A normal 13-year-old wouldn't be as accustomed to such things, but he was. And yet this feeling, it felt as though his soul was exiting his body. It felt like the epitome of death itself. Damien knew that he had come close to death before, but this was different. It didn't feel like someone was trying to kill him. More so, it felt as though someone was trying to obliterate him altogether. His soul, energy, desires, motivations, thoughts, they all came to the forefront of his mind against his will. As he slowly sat up, a wave of nausea hit him like a truck. Holy shit, he stifled as he covered his mouth. Whatever he saw earlier was no longer in the room. It was weird, the feeling of life versus the feeling of death. The difference was palpable, almost as though he could taste it in his mouth. He slowly made his way over to the sink, pulling himself up. As he looked in the mirror, the first thing he noticed was that he was bleeding from his eyes. It was a visceral thing to see, knowing that he was staring at his own reflection. His skin was deathly pale, but slowly regaining its color. He heard yelling. It was getting closer, but his ears wouldn't stop ringing for him to fully hear what was going on. He turned on the faucet to try and wipe the viscous red off his eyes and face, but it looked like he had 4 hands and the room was spinning. It was the pair of strong arms picking him up and cradling him that brought him out of looking at his reflection in the mirror. He turned to see who it was. "Father?" Damien groaned out slowly. Damien, are you okay? What are you feeling? Are you in pain?" He heard Bruce ask sternly, but yet filled with concern. "Weak. I feel sick. I felt death. Peter's gone. He vanished. I don't know what happened. A demon," Damien managed to whisper. Damien could feel his eyes getting heavier, but he knew that sleep was not an option. He knew all too well when people he knew were injured. He knew what happened to them when they said they just wanted to sleep. Please keep me awake," Damien whispered. Bruce's muscles strained under the weight of Damien's frail body, but he held his son close. His mind was racing as he made his way back to the others. Damien's usual sharp green eyes were dim, and the crimson trails of blood from his tear ducts smeared across his pale cheeks. His breasts were shallow, each one a struggle. It was almost as though Bruce could feel Damien's life force ebbing, the once vibrant energy now a faint flicker. The eerie silence that had settled over the mansion felt suffocating, the only sounds being the labored breathing of Damien and the quiet footsteps echoing in the dark hallways. When Bruce finally stepped into the main room, Tim was crouched beside Barbara, who was sprawled on the floor, her usual keen eyes unfocused as she winced in pain. Her complexion was ashen, and Tim's hands hovered over her, trying to find a way to alleviate her suffocating. Jason stood a few feet away, his gaze fixed on the floor, his fists clenched tightly at his side. The haunted look in his eyes made Bruce pause, recognizing the unspoken dread that had settled over his other son. It was a feeling Bruce knew all too well when he encountered Jason after he thought he had been long dead, a reminder of the Lazarus pit and the terrible power they held over life and death. "Tim, Jason," Bruce's low voice, a mixture of command and concern. "I need your help with Damien. It's bad." Tim immediately looked up, his face reflecting the gravity of the situation as he nodded and moved to help Bruce. Jason seemed to snap out of his thoughts, but the unease lingered in his expression as he joined them. "Barbara, how are you holding up?" Bruce asked as he gently laid Damien down near her, his voice softening as he glanced at her. "I've been better," Barbara replied weakly, trying to muster a smile but failing. She winced again, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch Damien's cold hand. America screamed something right before the red cloud things, whatever that thing was. She says something about a Mount Wundagore and the Dark Hold. I'm not sure, but that thing, it's like it tore through me. Constantine and Zatara are on their way. They'll know what to do. Bruce nodded, but his thoughts were divided. He didn't know if Barbara was 100% confident that John and Zatara were going to have all the answers. Damien's condition was dire, but there was a gnawing worry about Dick. He looked around the room, noting the absence of his eldest son. Dick, where is he? Bruce asked, his voice tightening with worry. We lost contact with him. He just disappeared, Tim said, his expression grim as he held up his communicator. His signals went offline a few minutes ago. We tried to reach him, but nothing. America, too, Jason added, finally speaking up. She was with us, but she's gone silent, too. Something's wrong, Bruce, Barbara said, her voice carrying the weight of the situation. They were here, and then they just vanished. That doesn't just happen. Maybe those clouds got to them. Bruce's heart sank at the thought. Potentially losing Damien was one thing, but the idea that Dick and Peter might also be in danger, possibly even worse, was unbearable. We need to find them, Bruce said, his voice steely with determination. But we can't just go in blind. We need to be prepared. It's a demon or entity, Damien whispered, his voice barely audible but cutting through the tense atmosphere. I should have seen it coming. The way Peter had been acting recently, it's not from here. I can feel it, like it was draining everything out of me. But it was affecting Peter more. He was struggling. If this thing followed Peter here, it could be after him specifically, Tim suggested, his mind racing through the possibilities. Maybe it took them somewhere, but where? And why? Or maybe it's just trying to finish what it started with Peter, Jason murmured darkly, still unsettled by the familiarity of the situation. Whatever it is, we can't just sit here. We need to act fast. Constantine and Zatanna will know more. I know they will, Barbara reminded them, her voice more composed now despite the pain. But until they get here, we need to figure out where they might be. If that thing took them, there's a chance they're still alive, but we don't know for how long. Bruce clenched his jaw, his mind racing. The mansion was vast and countless places to hide or be trapped in, but his instincts told him that if Chthon had taken Dick, Peter, and America, it wouldn't be something obvious. I won't lose them, Bruce said firmly, his eyes narrowing. We start searching immediately. Stay in contact and be ready for anything. The room was filled with a tense silence as the BatFamily prepared to search the mansion, the weight of the unknown hanging over them. Each of them knew that the next few moments could determine the fate of their missing friends and possibly their own. The air in the Batcave was thick with tension, the kind that comes out when too many questions hang in the air without answers. Tim Drake stood near the console, his eyes focused on the various screens showing a mix of data and security footage. John Constantine leaned against the wall, his usual air of casual indifference slightly dampened by the gravity of the situation. All right, John, Tim began, his voice steady but edged with urgency. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with here. Peter's situation. What do you know? John pulled a cigarette from his coat pocket, twirling it between his fingers before tucking it behind his ear instead of lighting it. His eyes narrowed thoughtfully as he spoke. Been doing some digging, mate. A few days back I found myself in the catacombs of an old empire, one that's been long forgotten by history, but remembered in folklore. Dark place, crawling with all sorts of nasty things, but conveniently enough, I stumbled across some records, taken of a certain Scarlet Witch. Tim raised an eyebrow, his analytical mind already connecting the dots. Conveniently, huh? Sounds more like you got lucky. Luck. John smirked, a glint of something almost predatory in his eyes. Luck's got nothing to do with it, kid. It's a bit more complicated than that. You ever hear of synchronicity wave traveling? Tim shook his head, intrigued but cautious. Bruce has mentioned it, but I can't say I know the specifics. Just that it makes you look pretty lucky. No, not luck. Like I said, it's ability of mine, John explained, his tone matter of fact. An instinct, really. Means I'm always in the right place at exactly the right time. It's more than just winning a slot machine or dodging a bullet, though that's handy too. It's about being where I need to be to stop the big bads, prevent the apocalypses, and maybe, just maybe, save the bloody world. It's uncanny, but it works. So that's how you found out about the Scarlet Witch? Tim asked, leaning forward with renewed interest. Exactly. Well, more so how I found out more than I already knew, John said, pushing off the wall and taking a few steps closer to Tim. What I found was troubling. The Scarlet Witch, see, she wasn't born, she was forged. Her power surpasses that of the Sorcerer Supreme, and her destiny, if you can call it that, was to destroy the world. Tim's eyes widened slightly, the weight of John's words sinking in. Destroy the world? But that didn't happen. At least, not in Peter's universe. Aye, that's what got me thinking, John continued. The Darkhold, a nasty piece of work, that book. It was written by the darkest forces, meant to corrupt anyone who so much as glances at it. It doesn't just corrupt, though, it creates. Specifically, it's the book that forges the Scarlet Witch. But only someone with the right kind of power can wield its magic and become her. So, Tim started processing the information. If the Scarlet Witch is so powerful, why didn't she destroy Peter's world? You think she's really from his universe? Good question, John said, tilting his head in thought. From what I gather, she didn't. And from what you're telling me, Peter had something to do with that. Seems like he might have been part of the reason the world almost ended. Part of the reason it didn't. Tim nodded, the puzzle pieces beginning to fit together. He was. Peter got tangled up in that mess in his universe, along with America, and it was a close call. I kind of got that it was a culmination of a lot of things going on simultaneously, but if what you're saying is true, then maybe it wasn't just the Kython that we're dealing with. John finishes the thought for him. There could be more to this. If the Scarlet Witch is involved, we might be looking at something much bigger. Tim's mind raced as he considered the implications. You can sense any residual demonic energy around the manor. Anything that might give us a clue if something else was involved? It's not so much demonic, lad, John said, closing his eyes briefly as if to feel the air around him. It's magic, but not just any magic. It's like reality itself was altered, twisted in a way that makes your head spin if you think about it too hard. Tim frowned, remembering something America had mentioned earlier. America told us about Wanda, about how she changed everything in a city called Westview, New Jersey. She could rewrite reality, create people out of thin air. She kept an entire town bound by her magic for a decent while. Maybe that's what we're dealing with here? Bloody hell, John muttered, genuinely impressed. That's chaos magic at its finest. Powerful stuff, unpredictable, and very, very dangerous. So, Tim said, his voice dropping as he tried to piece it all together. Is it possible that Scarlet Witch intervened? Could she have taken the others instead of the Kython? It's a possibility, John admitted, his tone more somber now. But whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I honestly don't know. If she's involved, then we're dealing with something that could go either way. Best we figure it out fast before it's too late. The cave felt silent as the weight of John's words settled in. Tim stared at his screens, feeling the enormity of the situation pressing down on him. If the Scarlet Witch was involved, they were facing an enemy unlike any they'd ever encountered. But Tim knew one thing for certain. They couldn't afford to be on the back foot. They had to get ahead of this, whatever it took. Bruce sat beside Damien's bed, his face set in a mixture of concern and frustration. Alfred stood at the foot of the bed, preparing an IV as Damien struggled to sit up, his determination evident despite his weakened state. Damien, you need to stay still, Bruce said firmly, his hand gently but firmly pressing Damien's shoulder back against the pillow. You're in no condition to be up and about, let alone helping us find Dick, Peter, and America. I'm fine, Father, Damien protested, though his voice lacked its usual sharpness. They need our help. Dick wouldn't just disappear like that. And Peter, We're going to find them, Bruce interrupted, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. But you're not going anywhere. Alfred and I will take care of this, and you need to focus on recovering. Alfred approached the IV, giving Damien a look that brooked no argument. Master Damien, as much as you may want to push yourself, your body has been through quite an ordeal. Let us take care of you now. Damien reluctantly settled back, his frustration palpable, but there was also an unusual hesitation in his demeanor. Alfred carefully connected the IV, his hands steady in practice. Where else do you feel pain, Master Damien? Alfred asked, his tone gentle as he assessed Damien's condition. The pain. It's the least of what I felt, Damien admitted, his voice quieter than usual, a rare vulnerability seeping through. It was the fear, the hopelessness, like I was being coaxed into giving up. I've never felt anything like it. Bruce's eyes narrowed slightly, surprised by Damien's confession. Damien was unusually resilient, almost to a fault, and seeing him shaken in this way sent a ripple of concern through Bruce's otherwise controlled exterior. Damien, Bruce began, his voice softer now. You've been through something unimaginable. It's okay to feel this way, but you need to let us help you. Alfred nodded as he prepared to draw blood, his voice carrying a soothing reassurance. The toll this experience has taken on your body is significant, Master Damien. It's not just physical. Whatever entity attacked you, it left its mark on your mind as well. Damien remained silent for a moment, his usual bravado absent as he processed his father's words. His gaze drifted to Bruce, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. We should have been more stern with Dick, Bruce said, shifting the conversation slightly, but keeping it grounded in the present situation. Peter needed to be more vocal about what he was going through. We let him retreat too far into himself. Dick wanted to protect him, but maybe we're too lenient. too afraid to push him. Dick was just trying to help, Damien replied, his voice tinged with regret. But you're right. Peter needed him more than just comfort. He needed someone to challenge him, to get him to open up. I should have seen it, Bruce admitted, a rare moment of self-reproach. We were trying to protect him, but in doing so, we might have let him slip too far into a sense of reclusiveness. We should have done more. Damien nodded, his expression hardening slightly. We need to make sure they're okay, Father. Dick needs to be the priority. He wouldn't leave us like this unless something was really wrong. Bruce reached out, placing a hand on Damien's shoulder, his grip firm but comforting. Dick is a priority, Damien. But right now, you're here, and you're hurt. You're my priority right now. Damien's eyes softened at Bruce's words, the rare display of parental concern hitting him in a way that few things ever did. For all his strength and training, Damien was still his son, and in this moment, that truth was undeniable. You need to trust the family, Bruce continued, his voice steady and reassuring. Trust Zatanna and John to get as much information as they can. We'll find Dick, Peter, and America, but we need you to be strong here. Damien's resolve faltered, the fierce determination in his eyes giving way into something more vulnerable, something more human. He nodded slowly, finally allowing himself to lean back into the bed. All right, Father, Damien said quietly, the fight leaving his voice. I'll trust you, but please, don't let them go. We won't, Bruce promised, his voice firm and unwavering. We'll bring them back, but you need to let us take care of you right now. Alfred finished drawing blood, his expression one of quiet compassion as he gave Damien a nod of approval. You're stronger than you know, Master Damien. Rest now, and let us do what we must. Damien closed his eyes, the exhaustion finally catching up with him. Bruce and Alfred exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They both knew the gravity of the situation, but for now, they had to ensure that Damien was safe and stable. As Damien drifted off to sleep, Bruce sat back, the weight of his responsibilities heavy on his shoulder. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, he had to trust in his family, and in himself, to bring them all back together. The Batcave's dim lights cast shadows as Barbara, Jason, and Zatanna huddled near a computer terminal, the soft hum of machinery filling the silence between their words. Barbara's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up data and scanning for anomalies, while Jason paced behind her, the tension in his body visible in every step. Zatanna stood nearby, her expression pensive as she mulled over the supernatural implications of what had transpired. So how exactly did this entity, this thing, attach itself to Peter? Jason asked, his voice sharp with frustration. I should have noticed something was off when Peter started lashing out. I should have checked for something more. Don't beat yourself up, Jason, Zatanna said softly, her tone carrying a note of sympathy. There's no way any of you could have known without the right magical expertise. Possession is one thing, but this feels more complex. Barbara paused her work, glancing up at Zatanna. You think Peter was possessed? Possession usually involves the complete takeover of the host's body and mind, Zatanna explained, but Peter retained autonomy over his actions. He wasn't controlled in the traditional sense. Instead, it seems like he was being influenced, mentally impacted to focus on his worst fears, his darkest thoughts. That's the hallmark of something else entirely. Like what? Jason demanded, his eyes narrowing as he tried to piece it together. Like Kython, Zatanna said, her voice dropping slightly, the name hanging in the air like a dark omen. Kython is an ancient, malevolent being, a god of chaos and destruction. He's been known to corrupt and manipulate twisting minds to his will without fully possessing them. Jason's jaw tightened as he processed the information. So we're dealing with this god of chaos and we let Peter get sucked into it? How could I have been so blind? Jason, Zatanna interrupted, her voice firm with understanding. You couldn't have known. None of you could have. Without magical abilities, detecting something like Kython's influence is nearly impossible. Barbara glanced over at Jason, then back at Zatanna. When the attack on the manor was reported, what exactly did you see? There was a massive spike in energy, Zatanna said, her brow furrowing as she recalled the event. When Peter, Dick, and America were taken, it was like a surge of chaos magic hit the entire area. The readings were off the charts, but chaos magic is something I'm not comfortable with, to say the least. Jason noticed the hesitation in Zatanna's voice and turned to her with a scrutinizing look. Why do you sound so hesitant about chaos magic? Because chaos magic is unpredictable, Zatanna admitted, her voice tinged with unease. It's one of the most dangerous forms of magic. It doesn't follow the usual rules. The Scarlet Witch, she's a legend. A being of immense powers forged by chaos itself. And in this universe, she doesn't exist, thankfully. Okay, Tim and John are covering that. We need to focus on the multiversal implications of this. What about America? Barbara interjected, steering the conversation back to their immediate concern. She can travel the universe at will. If she's not bound to any one universe, does that make her a threat here? America is powerful, Zatanna acknowledged. Her ability to travel the multiverse is something few can even comprehend. The danger isn't just in her travel, it's in the potential for things like Kython to exploit that ability. If Kython were to use her powers, the results could be catastrophic. She could inadvertently bring destruction across multiple realities. Barbara frowned, the implication of Zatanna's words sinking in. So if Kython is involved, can America really be considered a problem? Or is she just a pawn in something bigger? Kython is a threat beyond comprehension, Zatanna said, her tone grave. He's ancient, powerful, and malevolent. His influence spreads like a poison, corrupting everything it touches. If he's attached himself to Peter, and through him to America's abilities, we could be dealing with a multiversal calamity. Jason stopped his pacing, turning to face Zatanna directly. And Peter? How hasn't he caused this universe to unravel if he's bound to another? Shouldn't his very presence here be dangerous? Zatanna sighed, her eyes dark with concern. That's what I've been trying to figure out. The only explanation I can think of is that Kython might have done something to sever Peter's ties to his original universe, just enough for him to latch on during the multiversal travel and end up here. But that also means... It means Peter's in deeper trouble than we thought. You're saying that he is basically a vessel. Jason finished for her, his voice rough with worry. So how worried should we be, Zatanna? Give it to me straight. Zatanna turned away, her gaze fixing on something far off beyond the cave walls, as if searching for an answer in the darkness. Her silence was telling. Barbara and Jason exchanged a glance, the unspoken fear in their eyes mirroring each other's. It was bigger and more dangerous than they had anticipated, and the stakes, already high, were climbing higher by the second. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 13 of Birds of a Feather by Howls_Library. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you in the next chapter.